Hi, and welcome to the final research paper rubric description. Congratulations on making it to the end of the class. So in turning in your final paper, it should hopefully be some minor revisions, and this should not be a significant task. Right? You turned in, I've given you feedback on the first three sections of the paper. And so if you've made those revisions as you've gone, now you should have just recently received feedback on results and discussion section. If you make those adjustments and then put the paper together, you'll need to write an abstract and make sure that the verb tense is in past tense, and then you're good to go. So it sounds like a little more than it is, and this is 100 points, so it's significant. And this is your final research paper. So by all means, be pleased that you've come this far. I don't imagine you thought that this is the type of work that you were going to turn out or could turn out. Maybe it is. But so let me just walk you through the rubric here real quick and simple. Before I start with the piece by piece, just a couple details that I just mentioned in passing. So everything happened in the past tense. When you submitted it would be DB4. As far as your research methods, that was all future tense, right? Well, the study will examine this. The study will look at this. Participants will so-and-so. Well, now it's in the past, so you need to make sure that all that's in the past tense for the final research product. So you change all your verbs to past tense. When it came to participants, 20 participants were surveyed. And think of that in the past tense. And then, so proofread for flow. So it's also a really good idea to go ahead and put these things together and then let it sit for a couple days. And I realize we're always on a deadline, but it's also a great idea to have someone else read it and do the proofreading. So for the most part, you've done a lot of proofing. I haven't seen a lot of typos or errors or that sort of thing along the way. And if you're making minor changes, you're probably fine. But ideally, you'd have someone else read it. You'd put it together, have someone else read it, and then set it down for a couple days. Come back to it, read through it for flow, make sure it's where you want it, and then submit it. That's the That's the official recommendation. All right. So on to the rubric. So 100 points. The abstract is 10 points. This is really the only new content. The Purdue OWL link really explains what an abstract should be. I think it's 150 to 250 words. Whatever that is, use that because that's what I'll be using. As far as the word count, and then the requirement, what it should and shouldn't do. It is not an introduction. It is a complete summary of your paper, including the highlights, just like the abstract, just like it says it is. So it's really important to follow the formatting, and that's easy 10 points, hopefully. All right, next. This is more formatting stuff. These are auxiliary things. So the title page, the introduction, which you already had from, which I'd already turned around to you. The reference section, which should be in the right format, and references alphabetical. Again, APA format. Appendixes, so again, labeled correctly, including samples of your questionnaires and things you passed out, right? So things that would be helpful to the reader would want to know. So those are kind of auxiliary things. Another 10 points. Great. Your literature review should be done. Like, this should be a cut and paste. 10 points. If I gave you feedback on the last one, make sure you make those changes. If you had major things to reconnect, hopefully you did that. Here's another side note. If all the notes that I've been putting in your papers, go ahead and take those out or delete them. I'm not going note by note to say, I said that they should change this. I wonder if they changed it. Each paper gets a fresh read. So it gets a fresh, neutral opinion. And my overall impression, again, for lit review, you'll get 10 points based on these 5 bullet points. And I really do look to be generous. I'm not trying to, every time I find an error, I'm not marking off a single point. If you have these things and you've done them, having all of these things, for example, in the lit review, having all these things probably gets you 5 points. And if you do them well, it gets you 10, right? So it would only be if you neglected to have scholarly references that support all research questions, then you'd lose 2 points, right? So that's how that works. All right. Research steps. Again, this is the same. I haven't changed this. There was a lot of feedback about the justification here. So make sure that that's been revised and updated and expanded. Just take my notes into account. You have the same coach, the same proofreader this time as you did 3 weeks ago. So if I had a problem with 3 weeks ago or a month ago or last week, I'm going to have a problem with it this week, right? So I'll have the same notes, and so that will impact your grade. Findings. So again, the same thoughts, right? Report results reported explicitly. So this number of people participated, this many people said yes, this many people said no. Out of the people who participated, this many were men, this many were women, whatever your variables are. You don't need to arbitrarily break down the population, right? Whatever your variables are, remember, this all points through the research question. Your study got approved and pretend funded based on the research questions you were asking. You researched the literature to support why those were good questions, why that was a gap in the literature. Make sure your results are addressing those questions. If you managed to write a survey or people didn't respond in the way you thought they were, this is a learning process, and the information you got from your survey doesn't answer those questions, that's okay for the purposes of this class, but you need to say so. If you pretend like you're answering the questions with the wrong information, it makes me think that you don't understand kind of this core fundamental piece of research. So that would be a problem here as far as giving full credit or demonstrating knowledge of this content area. So make sure you cover all your research questions. It makes sense to have subheadings and break it down. Research question 1 is this, and then analyze the data as it pertains to that research question. And then graphs and tables. So this is required. That's why you should get 10 points, right? The only way you don't get 10 points or the only way you get a 0 is if you have no graphs or tables. They need to be effectively present the results, well labeled, clear, easy to read. So if you have an axis, right, you need to label both your axes. On the y-axis, tell me what it means. X-axis, what does that mean? Then you have a little key about red and blue or 2 different color code things. That's fine. Bar graph, line graph, pie charts. You want it to be clear, well labeled, APA format. APA format, it should say, where it says table 1 or 1.1 or table 2 or whatever it says, make sure it's APA format. The format is essential to publish or to share any research. So otherwise it's chaos, right? If everyone just uses whatever font they want and whatever format they want, it's not efficient to read, right? So it's important that all that's APA format. I don't need a table for everything, a graph for anything. By way of feedback, if your last draft you included all of your raw data in a table, I don't need that. I don't want that, right? So all of your results need to be reported in narrative, in a paragraph form using words and commas, and that should, if there weren't any graphs, I should be able to read your whole paper and understand exactly what you said. Then graphs repeat the information in a really snapshot sort of way. I should also probably be able to go back and look at only your graphs and get a sense of what the study was. So it's important that you don't say, as shown in this graph, you can say see graph for an illustration, but nothing is based on the graph, right? I mean, the graph is based on the words. It's all based on the results. And if you didn't make that mistake, then it didn't. This probably sounds confusing to you. So graphs and tables to highlight key things. Like if you have 4 research questions that compare A's and B's, you probably want a graph to show A's and B's next to each other and say B's are higher than A's, and this is the relationship, right, of group 1 and group 2, or the pie chart for the number of people. But you don't need a graph for the number of people and the number of men and women and then their age range and then the teacher's qualifications, and then you don't need a graph for all those demographics, especially because that's not what you're studying. You're studying the impact of A on B, period, overall, that'd be one graph. And then if you want to break it down by gender, so the impact of A on B was different between men and women. See these graphs? That's a great way to illustrate that. All right, that's graphs. It's a little bit or a lot of bit on graphs and tables. Conclusions. So this is the only section here worth 20 points because you're interpreting your results, right? So what did your data suggest? This matters. And I added in here, this wasn't in the previous rubric, so add a hypothesis. Thank you to some of you who did that on your own. So that's the first thing you should do is answer your hypothesis. And let me restate, we don't prove anything in social research. Nothing is proven ever. Ever, ever, ever. There are no proof. We prove laws of physics, and those have been proven, right? So these things aren't proven. You would either reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis, even if you don't want to get into the tedium of that. Just say that the evidence supports the hypothesis that A is related to B. Also, don't say anything about statistically significant. We haven't covered any statistics in this course. We won't. You're not running any statistical analyses, so you won't know if anything is statistically significant. You're going to say A is more than B, so it appears there may be a relationship because A is more than B. But you don't know if it's enough more than B to really be statistically significant. So don't say statistically significant. I can't even say it. Don't say proven, but do address your hypothesis, right? The hypothesis stated that we expected or the relationship between A and B was expected because of this. The results supported this hypothesis, or there weren't really sufficient results because only 2 people answered that question. The other 8 left it blank. So data was insufficient. Awesome. That is a solid, equivocal answer. And nothing is mentioned in the conclusions regarding results that wasn't mentioned in the results. Results are the raw numbers, in sentence form, but this percentage this percentage this. Here it said, here in conclusions, you're going to tell us what that means, right? So there's a relationship between this and this based on these numbers. You shouldn't introduce any new findings here. All the findings have been reported in the results or findings section. You're drawing conclusions from that. So you should be able to, or anyone should be able to read your results or findings section and draw the same conclusions you do. Okay. New questions or new insights generated from your study. So this is just to highlight what your study. So you want to compare this to the literature. This isn't necessarily where you cite the literature. The next bullet point is, but if you have a finding that's new, this is a new piece of information that wasn't found in middle schoolers before. Note it. Connect your finding to existing literature. Again, if you find A is related to B, go ahead and cite that Johnson & Johnson also found A related to B in their sample size, or they found it to be different. And the current study is contradictory to them. Wonder what that means. What limitations does your study have? Everyone does a pretty good job with limitations. Again, limitations about your study, future topics about your study. If you did a study on teachers and you want your next research projects on remote control cars, that's not what we're looking for, right? We're looking for, you did this study on teacher qualifications. Now you'd like to, in the future, this should be broken down by gender. It should look on different SES. It should look at different setting. Whatever the next logical progression is. Not, hey, some other ideas I have that are entirely unrelated. It should be directly related. Again, all your research questions should be addressed. If you have to use subheadings to keep yourself honest, great, do it. Format, the same format requirements all along. Spelling, professional, grammar, APA format, third person, etc., etc. And then submit it on time or an extension. There's not a lot of room for extension, so it's important that it's on time. I believe that's all I have to say. Again, great job. There shouldn't be a lot of rethinking this. I would do your revisions on results and discussion section in its own document, and I would cut and paste. Do your abstract, read through it, and then let it sit. Come back, read through it all once, make a few changes, and submit. I'm sure you've done a great job. Looking forward to giving you as much credit or full credit for this project, and you get your reward for a semester of hard work. All right, email me if you have questions. Thanks.